1962, I get a gig with the Four Tops. And it's my first gig going on the road. The piano player, a guy named Johnny Griffin, everybody thinks about the saxophone player, but this pianist was like one of the main guys who did the major recording sessions for Motown. Johnny Griffin was a well-trained pianist. He could play blues. Of course, he played all the gospel music because that was a very major part of playing, piano and organ and things like that. And so his sister and I gone to high school. He told her that he was looking for a saxophone player. And she had heard me somewhere. She said, well, you should call my friend. So he called me. And I went over to his house, and he had some music, and he said, I want you to play something for me. He put the music in front of me, and by then I could sight read. I sight read the music and played through the chord changes. And he said, okay. Then he gave me another one. I think he had 2, 3 tunes that he wanted me to play. And he said, yeah, he says, these tunes are easy. He says, basically, we just play background stuff and a little bit of solos in between before the tops come on the stage. And then we'll play the first tune to start the evening, and then, that's it. But, we're getting ready to go to Atlantic City, and we're going to play upstate New York in the Borscht Belt, or a place called Laurels and Grossinger's and those joints. We played in a place called 500, Club 500.
Atlantic City?
Atlantic City. And, those were the joints we played.
Wow.
And then then we had some time off between playing up in the Catskills before we actually played in Atlantic City. So these guys, they already had been to New York, and they had friends, and they had associates. So they said, well, what we're going to do, we're going to get you a hotel, and we're going to be off for like 2 days, maybe about 2-3 days, and then we'll come back and pick you up. They gave me some money, so they said, have a good time. I mean, this is my first time ever in New York, right? So I'm just like, wow, I'm fascinated by the smell, the noise, the sounds, I mean, everything about it. I'm just out there. And the rhythm section guys, they already had their thing, so I didn't really hang with them. But I was just walking around, and I walked down on East 4th Street, and I found this club called the 5 Spot, and discovered that night, Thelonious Monk was going to be playing in the 5 Spot. So I just continued my walking around. I knew where I was going to be that night. I walked around until about 8, eating New York pizza and just checking out the city, just getting through it, And at night I went back to the 5 Spot. I got there before everything started, got me a table so I could see the band and see Monk and hear the music, and I stayed all night. And it was that night that I got to see a lot of musicians that I'd only seen like in Downbeat magazine and on the record album covers. And I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden it was just like this influx of these great people standing at the bar and sitting and listening to Monk. Monk had John Orr, he had Charlie Rouse, and I think Denny Richmond. Not Denny Richmond.
And Riley?
No, it wasn't Riley. It was another drummer before that. I can't remember this guy's name. But it'll come back to me. But anyway, I just sat there and I was fascinated, just looking at Monk. I didn't realize what a tall guy he was. I mean, he would just get up and light a cigarette, twirl around and kind of dance because you could there was an area that was right next to the sidewalk with windows. So if you were out on the street, you could look into the club and you could see Monk sitting at the piano. And wow, that was just one of the most fascinating nights of my life. And I was sitting there and, I had an epiphany. I said, I'm going to live here because this is where everybody lives. All the great guys live here. If I don't live here, then I'm never going to know much about the music. And by that time, Motown was starting to blow up. So a lot of guys I knew, they were starting to get those gigs because they were starting to tour with Martha and the Vandellas and, Smokey and the Miracles and all that kind of stuff. So when the Tops came back to pick me up, they were curious. They said, well, man, what did you do? Did you meet any girls? I said, no, not one. I said, well, what did you do? I said, I went to hear Thelonious Monk. And they were in shock. They said, what? We would have loved to have heard that. I said, well, he just played around the corner here at this place called Pocket. I said, well, what do you think of New York? I said, I love New York. And I'm giving you my notice. I'm going to work 2 more weeks. And then that's it. I'm going to live here in New York. They just kind of looked at me. So I said, okay. So we blasted on off, went up to the Catskills, did our gigs. Last show starts at 2 a.m. And, people are sauced to the hilt. They are very, very drunk and having a very good time all night long. And so we played there. We played there actually for 2 weeks. And it was really cool because during the day, it's beautiful during the day. It's so lovely up there. So I just stayed in my room and practiced and walked around and checked out the countryside, But then after the gig was over, they paid me off. And I said, okay. And I went back to Detroit and I stayed for a week because I had some unfinished business. And then I caught a Greyhound from Detroit. And I went to New York and I celebrated my 22nd birthday in New York. I didn't really know anybody.
Wow.
But, I found a Y. So then you could stay at the YMCA. So I had a little cash, so I stayed in the Y. And I just walked around the city and I found some of my friends who were already there from Detroit. But, they were kind of ahead of me in that regard. So I didn't really hang out with them that much. And so after the first week I was there, I sort of chimed into the city itself, what it was, and I was starting to be pretty broke. So I called my father and I asked him for some money. He says, yeah, I'm going to send you some. He says, but this is all I'm going to send you. So I said, that's fine. I'll send it back. And, that next week I went out and I went to the New York Employment Office. And this young guy, he interviewed me. He says, well, how did you happen to end up here in New York? You're from Detroit. I said, well, I came here with a band and I decided that I would stay here because I just think that I stand a better chance of developing if I'm here where everybody lives, He said, oh, I see. He said, but what else have you done to make money? I said, well, I just spent a year working in the hospital taking care of research animals. And he said, oh, really? He looked at me, he said, do you know how to take care of research animals? I said, yeah, when I worked in the hospital, my job was to take care of them after they had surgical procedures. And, I had actually been, invited to go to the Society of Prevention of Cruelty to Animals because federal government at that time, they offered these programs for people who wanted to study animal husbandry and could possibly go on and become a veterinarian. So, they said, well, come and take the first segment of it, and this is after I got the job. I got the job, by the way. I went for my interview. I go up and I meet this incredible guy. His name is Dr. Swartz. I'll never forget him. And Dr. Schwartz invited me into his office. He says, well, tell me about yourself. What do you do? And I told him, I said, well, I'm a musician, but I want to live here in New York, so I need a job. And then I told him that I spent, a year or so taking care of research animals while I was going to music conservatory. He said, oh, yeah. I said, okay. He said, well, when I started at this hospital, I started as a janitor. This is my people migrated from Europe here. And he said, I came from a really poor family, but I started as a janitor and I worked my way through medical school. And he said, I think it's really interesting that you're here and you want to be a musician and you've done this work with the animals. I said, yeah, I've done it. I said, okay, the job is yours. So I had a job. So that job enabled me to take private lessons. I had an apartment. I stayed with some of my friends, which lasted not too long because I needed to have my own space. So I ended up with a space on 10th Street between Avenue C and D.